My name is Karen. I'm 30 years old. I work in clerical support at a shipping company. I got this job right after high school and have been here ever since. I've been working for over 10 years, so I'm pretty comfortable with my job and my coworkers. Life is good in that regard. But there's one thing that bothers me in my personal life. After work, I go back to my apartment. As soon as I open the door, the first thing I see is empty beer cans. Not just one or two, but sometimes nearly 10 scattered in the hallway. The person responsible for this is my dad. He's always loved alcohol. He's also timid and insecure, so whenever something bothers him, he drinks until he's drunk. Looking back, my memories are filled with images of my dad chugging beer. My mom, who used to keep him in check, passed away from illness 5 years ago. Now there's no one to stop him. The only saving grace is that he's not a troublesome drunk. He doesn't break things or cause a scene. He's harmless if you ignore him. My dad took early retirement and now relies on me for all living expenses, including rent. Dad, can you please stop this? I know it's futile, but I express my frustration anyway. He doesn't respond, just lies on the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. I sigh and start picking up the empty cans. Make dinner already. I hear my dad's voice. It's the same old story. He sees me as nothing more than a household appliance. Arguing would just make me angrier. I pretend not to hear and continue cleaning. I wish you were Jessica. I hear this line every day. It always makes my blood boil, even though I should be used to it by now. Jessica is my older sister. She's 5 years older and has moved out after getting married. I've always disliked her. She's selfish and always looked down on me. She has no friends because of her personality, which made her even more prone to bullying me. But my dad adores Jessica. They're similar in many ways. Both are friendless, so they get along well. He's forgotten all about me. When it comes to birthdays or Christmas, Jessica is the only one who gets celebrated. Of course, my mom used to make up for that. She strongly warned my dad not to discriminate between his daughters, but his attitude never changed. As a result, he still treats Jessica and me differently. I've accepted that I'll never get the love from my dad that I crave. Still, I'm the one who has to take care of him. I wish he'd show some gratitude, but I've never felt appreciated. I've come to harbor nothing but resentment towards my dad. He's always at home, and his presence forces me to suppress my anger. That fact has been tormenting me. Even when I'm tired from work, I'm expected to clean the house. Once the cleaning is done, it's time to prepare dinner. When I open the fridge, it's filled with canned beer. My dad keeps restocking it almost every day. He goes out on a whim during the day and comes back with loads of beer. Apparently, he's using his retirement allowance for this. He manages that money himself, and I don't know the exact amount, but considering he can afford daily booze, he must have a decent amount. If you have that much, contribute to the household expenses. I always think that. I push aside the canned beer in the fridge to find some buried ingredients. I gather them and quickly stir-fry something for dinner. Once I place it on the table, my job is done. My dad will start eating whenever he feels like it. Having finished my daily duty of caring for my dad, I quietly leave the house. A 5-minute walk from home, there's a cafe. It's open late and serves good food. For someone like me, who doesn't feel at home in my own house, this cafe has become a sanctuary. You look down, as usual. Miss Tyrant, the owner, always greets me warmly. She's 10 years older than me and has become like another sister. Actually, she's more reliable and kinder than my real sister. I vent here every day, and Miss Tyrant always comforts me. Today, after my usual rant and as closing time approached, I noticed a pile of cardboard boxes in a corner. When I asked Miss Tyrant about them, she let out a rare, deep sigh. I'm always the one listening to complaints, so today you can listen to me. She began to speak, looking tired. Apparently, she has a relative who's an antique collector. She's been asked to store part of the collection, and the boxes in the cafe are just a fraction of what's at her home. I couldn't say no. He's family. Every household has its own set of problems. I genuinely thought that. I regretted that all I could do was listen. I wish I could be someone who uplifts others. I took a sip of my now cold coffee and decided to leave. A few days later, I returned home from work and noticed something different. As I opened the doorway, I saw an unfamiliar woman's coat hanging there. From the living room, I heard my dad's unusually cheerful voice, and another voice, one that sent chills down my spine. I rushed to the living room and found my sister, Jessica. Who does she think she is, dressing so eccentrically? Her outfit was so flashy and bizarre. Even her hair was dyed in a color so hideous it looked demonic. "Hi, Karen. Long time no see." I couldn't muster the energy to respond to Jessica's cheerful greeting. Even though she's family, she's not someone I can welcome. She's so selfish that she's been involved in legal troubles that required compensation. What has she done this time? Just hearing her voice makes my stomach churn, and seeing her in person now, I can't stop feeling dizzy and nauseous. She's my sister, but she feels more like a curse. I cautiously asked Jessica why she'd suddenly shown up. In a very casual tone, she said, "I've decided to live here." I was speechless at her sudden announcement. I glanced at my dad, who was wearing a smile I'd never seen before. It turns out Jessica had gotten divorced and had been living alone for a while. She hadn't held a steady job and had quickly reached the end of her financial rope. So she'd come here, relying on my dad. For my dad, who adores Jessica, both her divorce and her return were good news. That explained his big smile. But for me, it was terrifying news. Living with my alcoholic dad and selfish Jessica meant I'd have to support both of them. No way! I'm not living a life of servitude. I immediately objected. When I asked them how they planned to cover living expenses and food, they both said, "You'll take care of it." That was the last straw for me. Before I knew it, I was lashing out at them. "How dare you! Doing nothing but drinking all day? You come back out of the blue and expect your little sister to support you? Aren't you ashamed?" They were silent for a moment after my tirade. But then they retorted, "You're the one who's disliked by the family. You're only good for making money, so it's natural for you to work for the family." What audacity! How can someone who can't even earn their own living say such a thing? I was beyond angry. I was dumbfounded. Jessica then began urging my dad to kick me out so she could move in. My dad obediently told me, "Jessica's back, so you, the parasite, need to leave." At that moment, something inside me broke. For about 5 years since my mom passed away, I'd been supporting my dad. What for? I'd been holding back my feelings and desires, and in the end, I was called a parasite. Neither my dad nor Jessica has a good character, so I never expected praise. But shouldn't they at least acknowledge my efforts? Who should I blame for the misfortune of not having a supportive family? I felt crushed by indescribable pain and sadness. "Are you sure about this?" Jessica probably took my question as a plea. My dad looked happy just obeying Jessica. They both didn't realize that my words were a final warning. "Just get out." After receiving their reply, I left the living room. A little later, Jessica came into my room. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a handwritten contract by Jessica. It stated that my dad was the leaseholder of the apartment, that I was responsible for paying the rent, and that all the furnishings belonged to my dad. In other words, I was to leave the house with nothing and continue paying the rent. They were trying to enforce this blatantly unfair agreement through a handwritten document. Even for the naive and clueless Jessica, I didn't think she'd go this far. Still, I decided to play along. However, I added a condition that they couldn't restrict my actions beyond what was written in the agreement. Jessica seemed suspicious, but didn't question it. As long as she got her way, she was content. That's just how she is. A few days later, the day came for me to leave the apartment. True to the agreement, I didn't touch any of the household items. With just a single bag, I started walking to my new place. Only Dad was home. Jessica was at her own place, preparing to move. Dad would go help her in the evening, and she'd move into the apartment the next afternoon. That was the plan. Dad was looking forward to living with Jessica and couldn't hide his excitement. Seeing him like that really got under my skin. He never smiled when I was the one supporting him through hard work. He was always drowning in alcohol and treating me like a servant, and Jessica's presence only added to my irritation. How far will she go to get her way? Is she willing to disrupt her sister's peaceful life just to satisfy her own desires? The more I thought about it, the more my feelings of hatred and anger surged. Frustrating as it was, logic wouldn't get through to those two. So I decided to switch gears. That afternoon, I visited the house with the movers I'd hired. It was around the time Dad would be heading to Jessica's place. It was better for him not to be there while we moved things. "Are you moving all the household items?" asked one of the surprised movers. I can't blame her for being shocked. The amount of stuff I'd asked to be moved was excessive for a single woman. Still, there was no mistake in my request, so I answered with a smile. "Yes, that's right." The next evening, my mobile phone rang while I was relaxing in my new home. It was Dad. Finally caught on, huh? I chuckled to myself as I answered the call. "What the hell are you thinking?" Jessica's yelling shook my phone. I'd anticipated this reaction, so I just set the phone down on the table. "What's the matter?" I asked, and Jessica's voice got even louder. "The whole room is filled with cardboard boxes! We can't get in!" I couldn't help but laugh, imagining Jessica yelling at the doorway and Dad standing there, dumbfounded by a home filled with cardboard boxes. I had made a deal with Miss Tyrant from the cafe to store her antiques as a favor. However, I hadn't anticipated that the amount would be enough to fill a 3-bedroom apartment until I saw Miss Tyrant's home with the movers. As a result, my old apartment was filled with boxes from floor to ceiling, literally leaving no room to move. I could now understand why the mover had double-checked so many times. Jessica was still making a fuss. "Do you think you'll get away with this?" The agreement didn't say anything about not filling the place with stuff. There was no room for argument. I had the upper hand, and it was unshakable. Besides, there's still living space available. Even I didn't go so far as to fill the bathroom with boxes. Dad and Jessica could technically live in there, if they had to. Well, that's if they could even make it that far. Seemingly out of energy to argue, Dad took the phone. He was mumbling complaints, but his voice was so low I could barely hear him. He must be in shock. I decided to give Dad some good news. "Those cardboard boxes contain valuable cultural property. If you damage even one, you'll be liable for damages." At that, Dad's voice quivered. Of course, there's no cultural property in those boxes. It's just stuff, and not worth much. Still, for a timid person like Dad, it seemed like the ultimate threat. Once I confirmed they had no more complaints, I hung up. After that, Dad and Jessica, unable to live in the apartment, tried to rent a new place for themselves. But neither had a job, and they had no one to help them. They tried using a guarantor service, but couldn't even scrape together the money for that. In the end, they couldn't rent a place due to insufficient identification. For a while, they seemed to be staying in internet cafes. Dad had already used up most of his retirement allowance, so that lifestyle didn't last long either. They tried to contact me several times, but of course I ignored them all. Still, societal norms about family ties persisted, and one day I got a call from the police. "Come pick up Dad and Jessica. They've been arrested for dining and dashing." I couldn't refuse that one. When I saw them again at the detention center, both were physically and emotionally worn out. They broke down and clung to me. I'm human too. When your family cries and begs, it's hard not to soften up. So I brought Miss Tyrant from the cafe along when I picked them up. Once at the cafe, they got daily lectures from Miss Tyrant. They were also made to sign an agreement, promising never to bother me again. After that, with Miss Tyrant's help, they applied for Social Security benefits. Now they're living modestly somewhere far away. It's sad not to have a supportive family, but there are people like Miss Tyrant who help you out. Just knowing I'm not alone makes me think maybe I could be thankful for Dad and Jessica, in a way.